Everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my game week 13 transfer plans. We're recording this video after the Man United versus Everton game, which went absolutely horrendously, just given the path that I actually chose to go with my team. It was a game week where I had so many paths that I was deliberating between. Close towards the deadline, I think two paths emerged quite clear for me to sort of maximize the short-term transfer value. I wanted to go either Gabriel to Munoz, or I wanted to go either Gabriel to Richards, and using the surplus funds to go from Enzo to Mbemo. Now, as it turns out, I did Enzo to Mbemo as well, and that obviously hasn't worked out. Ignoring Munoz has also not worked out. Richards got subbed off before he got DEFCON within the game. So it was an 18-point swing in terms of like my top transfer plans, but I'm not going to whine too much about it because this happens a lot in FPL. Like, you're going to have weeks where you're delivering with one plan or another. I don't think I can really say that there's too much to be said about it, other than probably, this is what happens when you almost take a 50-50 and it goes wrong. I don't think there's like a good way to explain it. You just almost have to suck it up in game weeks like this and just kind of enjoy the fact that, I still got things like auto sub jam. I still slightly, if ever, just beat the Haaland captaincy and got a green arrow, right? So I think I'm going to sit at 119k after this. So this will be 49 points after Anderson's bench jam comes in. Dewsbury Hall got 13 points, but he was at the back of my bench because I thought Krupi Jr. would start versus West Ham. There's probably no situation where I would have ever started Dewsbury Hall over Krupi Jr., just given that I knew Krupi Jr.'s minutes were likely to be good with the Kluivert injury being confirmed. So I guess if I rolled, I would only be taking on Krupi Jr.'s auto sub points, which in fairness is probably better, than what I did, right? Because I went aggressively to go Mbemo in a home game where I thought it made a lot of sense, where the only midfielder in the game this week that I wanted to bring in over Enzo, especially since I had maybe like doubts around Enzo's, minutes being perfect, right? I was thinking Enzo to be more around 82 minutes, something similar to kind of what he played versus, I think, Wolves when he got subbed off and he kind of asked to get subbed off just because, maybe preparing for Champions League and then also Arsenal. So I thought, okay, out of all the midfielders that I really wanted to go to, the only one was Mbemo, as you guys knew within my video on the team selection. And I found a path towards Mbemo that I still quite liked. And I still quite like it, right? I think if I kind of look at the United fixtures, at the end of the day, I'm still going to get West Ham at home, Wolverhampton away, and then there's going to be an abundance of transfers game week 16. We can move out of certain teams, certain players. But that was sort of what enticed me about going for Mbemo. Has it worked out? Absolutely not. So as I said, an 18-point swing. There's a world where obviously I go Saliba over Richards, so that's -4 points, and then, it just becomes, let's say, Mbemo versus Enzo. A lot of people kind of ask the general question, which I think is fair. Why sell someone before Burnley? I think in FPL, when you generally feel like you have a good team, there will be times where you make luxury moves, and I think it's easy to, for example, pick out a week where it's obvious maybe I shouldn't have moved out of a player versus Burnley, but you can also look at other competing Chelsea picks, like, for example, a João Pedro as an example, as I said, or even a Reece James. These are players who played versus Burnley, played pretty good games, and haven't delivered at certain times, right? Like João Pedro has gotten holes in previous matches, whereas Enzo, for example, got his hole in this match, and some people could have missed out on that one too. A lot of people also did Enzo to Minte, which I think, like, on balance, like, Brentford at home is probably actually I think tougher game than, let's say, Everton at home. I don't know why I said Everton, but as it turns out, of course, Everton put out a fantastic performance and actually defended extremely well for 80 minutes with a man down. So there's nothing really to be deserved, I think, from Bruno or Mbemo. So that's just outcome. But in terms of decision making, I don't really regret it. And I just wanted to say that because I think people have a tendency to just look at, okay, this is just like, just looking at points in term and reflecting on that and just saying, this is a stupid move or this is a bad move. I don't really feel bad about it. Like, I've seen managers also sell Eze this week. So, like, I think there's potential for maximum regret, but you also have to understand that in this game, sometimes you're making moves ahead of the curve, sometimes you're making moves behind the curve, and in both ways you can, I think, get beneficial points, right? For example, like a Dewsbury Hall versus Man United away isn't exactly a great game, but did he get 13 points and outscore most of the midfielders who possibly could have played this week? Absolutely. And that's life. You just have to move on. So I'm happy with the team. The reason why I spent so much time talking about that is because I think it's not me trying to defend my moves, but me trying to defend how I feel about, the outcome of a move like this and how it impacts my decision making. I don't look at this as if it was so clear as day that there was a Munoz move, as I said, just because that's just how outcomes go. In terms of Game Week 13, though, like in terms of picking the team, One thing I wanted to mention is obviously people will be deliberating between free hit or not free hit. And, you know, I'm in a position where it's hard to say like what's the best move possible. I guess if I was to think about setting up my team in the best way right now with no transfers, I suppose I'd play, let's say, Dewsbury, Hull over Richards, and just have it as such, like a 3-5-2 structure. Raya versus Chelsea, not ideal. Virgil with a good game. Senesi with a good game. I still think Sunderland's attack is a little bit overrated. And of course, there's a home and away piece to both Bournemouth and Sunderland, so I'm sure a lot of people don't like this move anyways. But Lacroix versus United seems quite good. Then, of course, I actually have 2 United minutes versus Crystal Palace, which is an ideal. Saka versus Chelsea, which is not ideal, but I think you still see that the strength of Arsenal is there. And so it always is going to feel bad, I think, moving off of Arsenal players on any given week. It just so happens that this might be the best week to do so because the City game has come and gone, and this is actually, you know, a tougher match on paper because it's an away match at Stamford Bridge. Semenyo seems fine. Apparently it was an illness that sort of kept him from the squad, so I'm hoping he's fine. But I think actually the thing on Semenyo to talk about is Kluivert's injury sort of helps, I think, with Semenyo's expectations going forwards. Like for games like 14, 17, you might actually want to keep someone like Semenyo if he has added pen share over this run. I know Marcus Tavernier actually took a penalty, which was quite shocking because I think I was expecting Evan Nilsson to maybe have a go at it, but it doesn't seem like he's within the pecking order at all. He did draw the penalty, so maybe there's also an element of that. Dewsbury Hall has been doing good. Have I started any of the goodness? No, I've only enjoyed the badness. And there is some irony there, I think, in that Thiago is also someone who's done incredible, and I think the only time I owned Thiago was for nothing. With Mateta, I think there's huge question marks here, and I think one thing that's actually been leaning me towards just simply, you know, not going for the free hit is Mateta, and I'll talk about that, you know, when we actually kind of pivot into the 2 sort of lines of streams in terms of how I plan to make my moves, whether I free hit 13 or 3 hit 16. The reason why I think these weeks are critical for me is because as someone who actually owns triple Palace, these are the kind of weeks to think about, right? Palace have City on 16, and then previously, I guess when I was on triple Arsenal, 13 was even more appealing just because I didn't own any Brentford. And I can see a lot of people moving into Brentford. I just don't think I'll own Thiago just yet if I'm going to free at 13. It will probably be a Gameweek 15 move, you know, given that Arsenal's the game after this. But that's it. Like, I think Mateta's minutes are a bit surprisingly poor, especially with Nketiah coming back from injury and the fact that they actually needed to chase. Like, I think the kind of copium that I had as a Mateta owner was that, okay, there are games where, let's say, Nketiah comes on, but those tend to be games where maybe, let's say, they're leading. Maybe they actually just have the opportunity to just do a like-for-like sub. But this was a match where they were chasing. And they didn't really go to, well, not chasing really, but they were in a drawing game state. And I felt like Glasner was pretty eager to actually get Mateta off the field. I mean, getting subbed off at 59 minutes for someone who's not played any minutes recently and is coming back from an injury, I think is an indication that, you know, he probably just wasn't fit for the game. And Glasner wasn't happy with the sort of output that he was producing on the pitch. And I think that just kind of reduces, once again, the value of yet another forward within the game. So whilst 3-5-2 is popular, 4-4-2 is popular, I think that's not going to change. Welbeck and Thiago are probably the most reasonable picks in the game. Maybe you can own both, but I would simply like to just do a Thiago move if I'm going to ignore, let's say, free at 13, and then use the surplus funds elsewhere. And it's time for my team structure to sort of take root. The interesting thing for me is I think a lot of the team structure changes that I'll be embarking on in the future don't really change like regardless of the free hit. In the past, I thought this would be the case because I thought Mateta would be a little bit more of a better hold. So I was kind of thinking that I wouldn't bring Thiago in too soon. But now when I think about it, I think my plans have changed. And Thiago maybe is already better than Mateta, like in my estimation, just going forwards, right? Just because of minutes. Yeah. As far as Anderson, it's nice to see him do well. I think Fulham put in a pretty good performance. He obviously gets DEFCON a lot, which is nice. Richards, it seems like he only had a hamstring injury, or not even a hamstring injury, but rather a cramp that Glasner mentioned was because maybe he was precluded from playing within the international break with the USA. So maybe he's just not that fit. There are going to be some questions, though, around, let's say, whether he's fit and available to play maybe, let's say, both the United game and the Burnley game. So I do have some question marks over that. I'm really hoping that Richards can do it. It's probably likely that Richards will get rested within the European match, but I'm hoping that he can start the game versus Burnley. But you know, I don't think I can make that call as a Richards owner. I'm just gonna have to suck it up in terms of Gameweek 14 and hope for the best. And that's kind of how I feel about the team right now. I don't think there are major issues. Even Semenyo, as I said, I think is a reasonably good pick. It just so seems like a lot of the points, you know, are coming from different players, and sometimes this is a week where even with the green, like I do feel like hard done by, but you just have to move on. All right, let's just quickly jump into the transfer plans. So we're back here with the My Team Pick and Rating tool. As ever, this is the Fantasy Football Hub My Team Pick and Rating tool, which you can actually see within the link in the description below. As a pro member, I tend to just use this to sort of visualize like what weeks are good for me, how my team looks like, how I feel about my team, that sort of thing. The main thing that kind of spurs me on to doing the free hit this week is, Semenyo, poorish game, just because Sunderland are a good defense. I don't really like playing defenders versus attackers if I can avoid it. And you have to free hit at some point in time in the first half of the season. I feel like I'm just going to pull the trigger because something that is quite interesting, I guess, is if you free hit on 15 or 16, there is a possibility, I guess, that you'll get hurt by almost like a tide of transfers to come in 16 or, a huge meta shift, for example. Like, let's say if people want to go Palmer, for example, in that week in Gameweek 16, there's a lot of moves that can be made. At the same time, if I own an AFCON player, there could be a lot of price drops that I could actually be missing out on sort of, trying to remove within my team if I don't get rid of them soon enough. And whilst I feel pretty comfortable about owning a player like Mbemo in the short term, that's the kind of piece I'm getting to where if I free it on 16, maybe there's a 0.2 transfer value loss on Mbemo. And is that necessary? If I feel like the free hits are close, I probably just want to free hit now and be done with it. So whilst I optimize my team and I think it actually shows that I have a really good team, I think it can be better. And that's simply because I just know when you pit defenders against attackers and it works in such a way like my team looks like this, obviously I'm planning, I would make 2 moves because I've got 2 free transfers left. But it's very unlikely that I'll actually want to even have, let's say, 1 defender versus 2 attackers, that sort of thing, if I can avoid it. And there are going to be future weeks where this is going to happen, but I think not to this level where there's such a huge gap in terms of some of the transfers that I'm missing out on. For example, on defense this week, both Brentford and Villa have some amazing games. Even Raya has a poorish game. So is this an opportunity to just upgrade my defense, whereas I can just recognize that the midfield's probably not going to lose too much value in the future? I think that's kind of how I view it. Even with Mateta, like I don't know how good his minutes will be depending on Europe. So let's go through a transfer line where we free hit on 13. So obviously if I free hit on 13 here, which is part of my chip strategy and my plan, I can just move on to Gameweek 14 where the team is actually in a pretty good spot. Like it doesn't even really need a transfer. So I feel like the only thing that I'd say is I'm on 0.2 in the bank. The core move that I want to make on Gameweek 15, which is the first week where I think I clearly have a bad Gameweek rating compared to what my team is probably just going Mateta out here into Thiago. So this is Mateta with a bad game. For Thiago with I think a slightly better game. I probably actually just think that Tottenham are just much worse than Fulham right now, especially when they're playing away. And I think there's an opportunity here to just do Duisburg Hall out potentially and go into Minte. So the big question is, will there be 3 sort of transfer value changes from now to then? I'm a bit annoyed with myself that I actually kind of passed up the opportunity to do Mateta to Thiago this week, because I think I'll talk about that in a moment, but I think my plans would have always been to do that because, when you free hit, it invalidates all your transfers. But if there's an opportunity that maybe I don't free hit this week, I guess I would have benefited from the transfer value of that with Thiago. But the key thing is I can't do anything about that now. I've got 0.3 left to go. Another surplus thing is I will have an additional free transfer. So when I make these moves and I optimize, I guess the plus here is that there is potential for me to save a little bit more money in the bank with whatever move that needs to be made, right? Like, let's say if it has to be me maybe downgrading Senesi to someone in that sort of 4.5-ish position, or even someone a bit cheaper, there's that. If I need to, I don't know, let's say move maybe Rupi Jr. into a Gu, I could do this on this week just to facilitate actually getting Thiago into the team and locking in Minte for this Gameweek 15 game versus West Ham at home. Previously, of course, to that game, I don't think I'm that fussed about not owning Minte because Nottingham Forest away is not a particularly great game. And even though he has a good match versus Aston Villa at home, my rolling team on 14 was actually exceptional. So do I seem too fussed about it? Not quite. So this is something to think about. And then on Gameweek 16, of course, we have a lot of free transfers. So if I go for the free at 13 path, I don't think I need to be, too fussed about the team. Like, I think even this rolling team here is actually not bad at all. Man United away, probably not ideal. Minte versus Liverpool, also not ideal. But I've got multiple free transfers to kind of rejig some things around. Maybe it's actually a case of I don't know, going for a different defender here. Like maybe I can, on this specific game week on 16, move out of Lacroix, maybe move out of a Richards, and that could net me, let's say, a City defender as well on a week where City actually have a pretty good fixture, because it's very likely, I think, in the future where I go Mbeumo maybe towards Foden on a game week like this on 16, especially if, let's say, Mbeumo could also leave to AFCON early. Something to consider if that's how I want to spend the funds. Or it could just be, I want someone like a Declan Rice within the team, and that could be what gives me enough money to, let's say, upgrade a Senesi on a week like this where, okay, that allows me to bench the Crystal Palace defenders, who actually, for the most part, are still amazing. So that's something that can happen too. But I won't spend too much time in terms of Game Week 16. So let's kind of refresh and talk about what my secondary path is. So my secondary path is maybe to play Game Week 16 free hit. So let's just lock that into the plan. The big thing that would change here, as I said, is I would go Thiago, and I probably, within the midfield position, would just do that Minte move this week. And I quite like it in the sense that I think it gives me all the players that I want in FPL in the short term, right? Minte is not going towards AFCON. This is not a good game for Minte, but it does lock in a player that I really like. I could just play... and I think I will play Virgil, for example, in a week like this. Do I play double Palace defense? I don't think so. I think in this case, I'm benching Richards for sure. And this is the team that I field in Game Week 13. And it's, not the best Game Week rating, as I said, but it does sort of set me up for the future a little bit better. And then in Game Week 14, I think this is a week where I just roll once again. I optimize the team. It's going to be a 4-5-1. Not exactly a Christmas tree, but a pretty interesting formation to field out. Everyone is at home or has a really good game here. So this is something that I was thinking about where, if I ignore the free at 13 move, I still think the Thiago Minte moves work really well, because I have a good opportunity clear here to bench Thiago as long as all these players are fit. And I do need Richards to play, so hopefully he does. And then in Game Week 15, it's kind of business as usual. So Game Week 15 is probably a week where not exactly the best transfers available. I do have 2 free transfers here, so maybe it's an opportunity once again, as I said, to move Senesi out. If I have a little bit money in the bank, potentially a City defender, like it could just be O'Reilly here, or I just roll into Game Week 16 and kind of take it on the chin, because Chelsea at home is not the worst fixture in the world, and then the team's back to being good as usual, but then I have the opportunity here to invest back into triple Arsenal, move out of Mbeumo here in Game Week 16. So these are kind of my transfer plans right now. What is leaning me, as I said, going back towards Game Week 13, just thinking about this here, what is leaning me towards the free hit and just locking that in is, I think I don't see how this is a much worse week to free hit than 16. So I feel like an opportunity cost thing in terms of just expected value, there's not a huge difference. I think there's the transfer value element in terms of 16 that I think is quite significant. I also think that that's quite nice, about free hitting on 13 is, I think the free hit 13 team is something I'm more willing to invest into, just because, as I said, of the team construct. So for example, if I think about the core of my team in Game Week 16, I think what makes 16 interesting is that these are all kind of like mediocre-ish fixtures, but it's not really the case where like I have players playing against, let's say, there's too many mirror matchups that I'm really worried about. Like Liverpool away is not too bad of a game for Minte, just because Liverpool have been so poor on defense. Whereas with Palace, it almost feels like on a week like 13, I really need them to cook, whereas I'm over invested into the United midfield, and it's not a good United game at all. Like here in this match, I'm almost hoping for Senesi to get DEFCON, but I know he's going to lose a clean sheet. I don't even know how the swing would be in Crystal Palace versus United, with United being away, because it almost feels like the attacking ceiling is quite low for a match like that. Whereas at least with Bournemouth at home, this is a really high value game for Bruno and Mbeumo. So whilst there's a poor mirror matchup, I think this is a week where I'll happily take it on the chin. Whereas on 13, like it does feel a bit painful. Like it doesn't, I don't even really see how I can get a good outcome here from the double mid, and then actually maybe probably just, even for example, as the model suggests, like to play double Palace defense against it feels very defensive, and even Saka, this is like one of his worst games in the run. So why not just keep Saka but then ignore his worst game? Same with Raya. I don't think I have that many mirror matchup issues in 16. Like Raya has a great game, Saka has a great game, Thiago has a great game. It's really just Minte, Verge, and then the United midfielders versus Senesi, and I'm unlikely to have Mbeumo at this point in time. So that's kind of how I feel about free at 13 and 16. I just think 13 is still a little bit more upside in terms of the swing, and I'm just going to go for it. Let me know what your thoughts are, though. Do you think like capturing the transfer value, getting the team structure down is better to kind of facilitate free at 16? Because the flip side of the argument, I suppose, is if I lock in the moves that I want for the players in the long term that I want, like Thiago and Minte on 13 now, I don't really have too many moves to make on 16, I suppose. and then I can free out on 16, maybe lose a little bit of transfer value on Mbemo if I absolutely have to, but I already have the team that I want. I guess the flip side of this is I have to wait to get to the team that I want if I free out on 13, and I have to wait till 15. But maybe that's good. Maybe that's good because there could be a lot of midweek injuries, because Game Week 14 is a midweek match, and maybe I prefer that. So I'm going to stick with the plan for 13. I think that was the plan when I did the Richards and Bema move as well. That probably also would have been the plan anyways if I went for the Munoz move. But I think both moves were kind of agnostic because Crystal Palace don't have the best of games on 13 and 16. But yeah, those are my thoughts right now. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what your transfer plans are. I'm also looking to get out a free hit video, so do stay tuned for that. That is most likely going to be as close to my team selection as possible. And hopefully there's not too many changes. But we'll also see whether European football has an impact on the free hit.